Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, as we touched on in last week's episode, the NBA and NHL playoffs are now underway. How's it going so far for Prime Sports and Bet Chris, and which games have been your biggest swings?
There hasn't been any specific games, but the favorites, the weekend just felt like a bunch of favorites won, blew them out. So results were pretty rough on that side of it. Hockey's always a little bit better, get a few upsets, bit of back and forth here and there. But I think the biggest thing, and I'll say this from the last 2 or 3 weeks, I did say 3 weeks ago, come at us with the baseball. We got crushed for probably the first 2.5 weeks. There was bugs, it was a little bit of chaos. Seems to be getting a bit more in place now and a little bit more on track. But yeah, considering the last few weeks, a lot of ups and downs, bit of green here and there, so it hasn't been too bad. But yeah, the first weekend of playoffs, didn't really go off with a big bang.
Well, speaking of favorites holding serve so far, Ohio has been in the spotlight, you could say, with the Cavs out to a 2-0 lead in their first round series. And Prime's first state also in the news, courtesy of its state regulatory body last week. On April 14th, the Ohio Casino Control Commission issued a notice of intent to fine Kalshi $5 million for operating unlicensed sports gaming in the state, marking the most aggressive state-level enforcement against a prediction market thus far. The OCC's letter flags that Kalshi hasn't paid any taxes or licensing fees while accepting wagers in the state since January of last year. And Adam, I'd be curious for your take, given that you're a licensed operator in Ohio. How is this all possibly changing the competitive landscape for books like Prime? And how much of a deterrent would a $5 million fine be, if any sort of deterrent, for a company valued around $22 billion?
Well, talking about picking up money off the ground, I think this is what Kalshi does when they're playing tiddlywinks in the office over $5 million. I don't think they're too concerned, but I doubt they're going to pay it. Because if ultimately they paid it, then that would be saying that they're doing something wrong, which in their mind, they're not. So, I will say that the regulators, I think this one falls on, not the legislators, have been very loud and vocal about, we're going to go after this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We saw Kentucky sort of put something in place last week with their new bill with potential, juggling act now for DraftKings and FanDuel come January. I'm sure they'll work it out, and I'm sure that'll end up in courts, whatnot. But I imagine Kalshi lawyers will probably make more than $5 million out of fighting this one and whatever else they're doing going forward. So it's a bit like Tennessee and all their fines that they issued all these offshore sports books over the last few years. I'm not sure if they've collected on any of those. But yeah, right now I don't see them getting this $5 million, even though pittance, based on their valuation and everything else for Kalshi, I can't see them heading down the road of saying, yes, sir, here you go. Here's your $5 million, and sitting there waiting for the next one, because now they've sort of put that in place.
And Joe, let's bring you into the fold here and shift back to the games themselves, with the NBA and NHL playoffs in progress. And with baseball season starting to hit full swing, just not quite yet for your Phillies, what has your attention the most as a fan right now?
First and foremost, the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is pretty interesting. You have a lot of narratives in there. They're doing really well. Buffalo seemed to, when you see the fan videos of how the city of Buffalo greeted their first playoff game in 15 years, absolutely nuts, only for their team to just absolutely choke it for the first couple of periods against a hated rival in Boston. But a regular Lazarus comes back from the dead comeback in that game. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how that one goes. You can definitely say, they're youthful and experienced against, the Bruins, who are, they may be old and decrepit, but they are definitely playoff masters. So thinking about the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it's interesting, I think in a way, this is kind of bleeding into the NBA playoffs here, is like, age and experience and craftiness really do count for something in the second season. Refs in both leagues seem to be swallowing the whistles. So, except last night, when the Flyers were playing, the Penguins, where it seemed like, a Flyer just had to brush the hair back of somebody, and it was a penalty. But you definitely see the physicality, leading to tighter games. Obviously, you should be looking at unders. Obviously, the bookmakers have priced in the unders in this season, looking at the historical performances here, because this is the way it always goes. But, it doesn't matter if it's the NBA or the NHL, physicality and being able to play rough, whether it's in front of the goal or in the paint, it seems to be the thing that really matters. Coaching, this is the time of the year everybody talks about how the NBA is a players league, and they're right. but this is the time of the year when it becomes a coaches league just as much. So expect to see the teams that have always, I mean, the Celtics, Joe, is, he's the only coach who I wish was a Philly coach instead of a Boston coach. Does amazing things with those guys, especially with Tatum trying to come back from that Achilles injury. I expect that Celtics are just going to chop up my Sixers. I'm not even bothering to get upset about that series. But then when you look at some of the other series, like, the Knicks versus the Hawks, I mean, that one is going to be just a brutal affair. Trae Young is not going to get loose. They're going to beat the living tar out of him in good old-fashioned New York style. So, I think that's the thing, is like, if you're looking at both of these and you're following along, the opportunities are in, the unders, under team totals, things like that, but be quick because no doubt the market's pricing them in.
And to that end, Adam, a quick follow-up for you, thinking about Joe's comments on the physicality we see once we get to the playoffs. How, if at all, do you adjust for that when setting playoff openers relative to what regular season openers may look like?
Well, I think the cream comes to the top in this. This is why we're seeing some of these blowouts in the NBA. Something changed a few years ago where generally your spread was 10, a halftime was 5, 5.5. And then it started showing up when the spread was 10, the first half was 7.5, 8. Because the better teams would go out, crush it, and then it'd sort of maybe come back in the second half. So there's a lot of variables and a lot of changes that happen over the years. But generally, especially in the NBA, I think the better teams end up coming out of it. There's really never that 7th or 8th seed that goes on a massive run sort of thing. Nothing really changes. Hockey, a little bit different, seems a little bit more of a level playing field when it comes into this. Goal is obviously a big piece of that. And then health. I mean, obviously, teams staying healthy, and been a long season and you do get a bit of luck here and there on the health side. But does it change it a lot? No, not a great deal. Is there some nuances that you go in there and you kind of learn that more from the bettors, that ultimately you sort of pick their brains and see where they're coming in on, and then over the years sort of collectively remembering certain leans or certain things that, the better players, customers bet into, and you just sort of protect that side of it. But yeah, for me, NBA's always been a struggle because the favorites generally go on with it, and I'm always betting underdogs. NHL, I've had a lot more success playing around in that world because generally I would just bet every underdog in the series because it seemed like it would be 1-1 after majority of the series to start off on the road.
From the state of the sporting calendar to the state of the gaming industry, Sports Betting Hall of Famer Sue Schneider wrote an editorial for SBC Americas last week detailing why she's worried about the current landscape. Among her concerns, she mentions self-inflicted wounds by the industry, misleading bonus offers, aggressive advertising, and account limiting practices. She also highlights having 30 plus years of industry experience and feeling like something has changed and not for good. Adam is someone who's also been in the industry for more than 3 decades. Which aspects of Sue's editorial resonate with you the most? And how does her conclusion land with you that today things feel very different?
I mean, things do feel very different. I mean, it's very chaotic and fast. When I first come to this side of the world, the gray market lived outside of America. Now the gray market lives within the borders of the US. So that's sort of changed a little bit, self-inflicted. And that's probably been from some people that are legislator advisories. I'm going to give the legislators a bit of a pass on this a little bit because as I'm learning more and more of this stuff, there's no way that they know everything. There's no way that they can put legislations on all these things that cross their paths and have serious understanding of it. So I'm sure they're reaching out to people that led them down a horrible path when it came to promo deductions. I did ask a regulator at a conference in Boston some years ago, why did they do it? To build an industry, he said. An industry that had been there for 30 or 40 years and had existed with billions of dollars of volumes, whatnot. But the other aspect that I won't let them get away with in a sense of how the fuck can they not learn from mistakes of other ones? How is Missouri doing promo deductions after they've seen all these other states go through that? And I think there was a story a week or so ago about, $100 million in revenue and nothing in taxes because it's all promos and everything of that. Like, come on now. Some of the other things that she sort of listed, advertising, I'm 100% behind this. And this has been blueprinted now for at least the last 5-6 years with the UK, Australia, all these most complaints you'll hear is it's everywhere. It's on the radio. It's on the TV. I can't watch an NFL game without it. 100% supportive of just getting rid of it in that sense. I think there's many ways to sort of advertise these days without blasting it on, what's meant to be sort of family orientated sporting events in that sense. She mentioned limited winners. Well, guess what? Limited winners have homes these days. It's called prediction markets. They're not getting limited as much. They're being, found a place and whatnot. Now, like 25 years ago when I first come over here and said, why don't they tax it? Now they just need to work out how to make money from a government standpoint off this as well. Bankruptcies, I think that's the big boogeyman in the US. I have seen studies in a sense of when they actually break down these bankruptcies, it's more on iCasino states, not purely sports betting states. So yes, I know it's a real thing. Yes, I know people are affected, but I think that and credit cards are more focused on the iGaming aspect, not necessarily the sports betting, which is kind of the competitive nature of the prediction markets. Addictions. Now, I know I have a couple of opinions on this. Yes, I know there's people with real addictions, real predisposition, whatever that word is.
Predispositions.
I know I have 100% two addictions. One, I am a degenerate gambler who got lucky falling into an industry that I could make money out of. Had I not fallen into this industry, I'm sure as hell know that I probably got myself into some trouble somewhere along the way. And even being in this industry, I've gone broke a few times in my 20s, having that aspect of it of not knowing when to stop, going full tilt, whatnot. My other addiction is women. Like I have spent, and I would also say for the fact that those that know me and how much I love to gamble and love to bet and whatnot, spending time with a good woman is probably more so the factor over my gambling aspect. When I'm seeing a data play out shoe shopping, like these are two things that I live with in a real life. And I'm self-aware enough to understand that addictions are real and whatnot. So, these are sort of the challenges that I know people go through. I know the US has, crack epidemics and all these other things. So I get the addiction aspect, but I'm also on the fence of, hey, we're adults, it happens. There's some self-responsibility on that. When it comes to the associations, yes, now finally FanDuel and DraftKings have a common enemy in prediction markets. So, maybe they'll get in line and work on some of these things, but they've had many opportunities to get ahead of some of these legislations and other things in that aspect as well. She mentioned about governors. Yeah, they were happy to come to the gold rush, take the money and build up their budgets off the back of sports betting. And now there's a little bit of negative media, which you also mentioned. And I think a lot of that gets blown out of proportion as well is, just the lay of the land and where it's at. It's found money that was going to other places. Yes, has it grown the industry? 100%. But there's still money that's not being captured in this space as well. So have things changed? Fuck yes. Are they for the good? Well, again, that depends on what you're looking at it. Personal people having trouble now that this is easier to access. So is marijuana, so is crack, all these things. Sure. But that's just part of life and that's the way it is. There needs to be an evolution here. And I'm going to say something that I've been against and will be very different to what I've said in the past is with the size of the American consumerism, I actually think prediction markets, unlike exchanges of the UK and whatnot, may actually find a way of making money and being successful in a sense of there is so much money getting traded through these products right now. Betfair never saw anything like this. Maybe cricket coming out of India was somewhat in the realm of that, but Kalshi and Polymarket, they are writing so much volume on this stuff that maybe taking their half a penny per trade is actually going to make them money in the future. 22 billion valuation? I don't know about that, especially when you got DK and that having casinos and all those other aspects. But there may actually be a way to profitability or some way existing a little bit longer than what I've thought about in the past because the numbers are the numbers.
All right, Joe, good luck topping that, but we're going to come to you. I will tee you up by noting that a lot of Sue's reflection focuses on the negative sentiment and growing backlash toward the industry from the general public, which is now being exacerbated in some ways by prediction markets. So to help combat this, she touches on her concept of coopetition, basically competitors coming together for the greater good. How likely do you think it is that different industry stakeholders do come together to meaningfully improve the industry's reputation?
I've known Sue for quite a long time. As a note, Sue was so important to legalization of sports betting and iGaming in America. Because when I first came out, like I came out of AOL and started this, the whole legalization effort and all, I didn't know of a single friggin' person in the online industry. And Sue, I was introduced to her at the old ice back when it was at Earl's Court in the back room and in like the back corner of the back room. And if it wasn't for Sue Schneider taking, I don't know, an interest or taking pity or some mixture thereof and introducing me around, who knows when this would have eventually taken flight, but it certainly wouldn't have for this guy. So I really respect everything that she has done. She's not just a casual opinion on this, and she has been around for a while. Having said that, I think the problem that you have with this notion of coopetition, which is where, and what we did regarding like legalization on that, there was quite a big bit of coopetition in there, but it was presented in a different way. We were trying to kind of open the door to America legally, and the door is open now. And the complicating factor is these big, would-be frenemies are publicly traded companies. They have a primary responsibility in the grand American tradition, primarily to their shareholders, not to the industry, not to each other, nothing other than to their shareholders and the bottom line. And I think that really complicates matters when it comes to any notions of really robust cooperation on how to better manage this industry, at least from the operator side. They've put together and funded their political action committees and associations and things like that. But I just don't think that you're going to see the level of effort and mutual disarmament that it would take in order for them to truly work together, simply because how do they explain that to their shareholders? How do they explain that to the public markets? So all of these things, everything that Adam mentioned, everything that Sue's mentioned, you can roll back the tape on me. I always say my biggest and only regret in legalization was in trusting that sports betting was going to be regulated, at least on the advertising and marketing end of things, the same way casinos and lotteries were already being regulated, how they were limited on when, where, how, and to whom they could advertise. And that all got thrown out the window, as Adam joked, because they convinced lawmakers that they had to quote and build an industry that the reason why we legalized it was because it was already a $500 billion a year underground economy. It didn't need any building. It needed conversion from an unregulated to a regulated market. It already existed. And to Adam's point, that legislators, they are busy, but how they can't just copy and paste successful legislation and implement it in their state markets. And instead, they just keep getting swindled by the big guys, letting them write off their marketing expenses at the expense of the state taxpayer. It's perplexing to me. I don't know how it happens. But that, again, that shows you there's not a whole lot of foresight when it comes to doing things in a way that protects your downside. Right now, it is just, and I was warned about this, and it was by a couple of guys, the guys who ran Greenwood Racing, which is a company that runs Parks Casino. They had created PhoneBet in the UK, came over and opened up that casino outside of Philadelphia, hugely successful. I remember meeting with them, in the early aughts, and they just said, Joe, if this gets legalized, it's going to be like the UK, and you're just going to see they're going to try and burn every dollar out of every customer, fleece them, hit them with every offer under the sun. If anybody gets ahead, they're going to kick them out, and it's just going to be pandemonium. And at the time, I said regulators will prevent them from doing that. They were right. I was wrong. I owe them a beer, I guess, right? But this industry has so far shown so little self-preservation and regulation instinct that I just need to have your hand from regulators to say, no, stop.
And pivoting slightly, but sticking with advertising practices, BetMGM CEO Adam Greenblatt said during last week's quarterly earnings report that prediction market platforms are increasing customer acquisition costs, forcing BetMGM to focus its marketing in less competitive states where prediction market spend isn't as aggressive. We've heard similar things from others across the industry, And this coming NFL season looks like it's quite possibly going to mark the largest cumulative marketing spend ever as platforms like Polymarket and Kalshi deploy their balance sheets, while operators like DraftKings, FanDuel, and Fanatics push to gain market share as well. Adam, how do you see this playing out come the NFL season? And how do you plan to approach it with Prime Sports and BetCris, especially considering you likely won't be competing on cost per acquisition?
So, yeah, I mean, that's the challenge of all of this. I got to see Adam speak offsite at G2E last year, and it really sort of, changed how I looked at some of these people because they have a job to do. As Joe said previously, like they're looking after their shareholders and the goals of that. So having a player that they could beat and hold 3 or 4%, not necessarily in their best interest. They're trying to find players that they can hold 10, 15, 20% against. Right now they're up against it. Sort of one of the comments he said about, buying keywords for the marketing aspect and how expensive that's coming. I get that because the last few months we've sort of been spending time in the Apple and Google world trying to work out how to do a proper market spend. How do we tack this? And I think we're up against it. I think we're going to have a real struggle potentially getting it going down those digital marketing ways and whatnot. So, for me, it's always been, how do we take this a different route? How do we take sort of some of the old school stuff and reconvert it into the US? How do we do it more local guerrilla marketing? How do we become the neighborhood bookie, replacing offshore, your golf course bookie, your bar bookie, whatnot? Because we're not here to replace DraftKings, FanDuel. And when it comes to prediction markets, there's opportunity. I mean, I sat all weekend sort of watching the golf again, and the opportunities of potential trades, arbitraging. These are things that potentially are our strength, understanding where those market makers are coming from on that stuff as well. So, we've always said from day one that we need to do it differently. We can't go head to head with any of this general marketing aspect. I guess that's why, I put out these data plays or trying to just chip away. But I think come the next few months, we need to kind of put that on steroids and work out ways of literally going door to door, knocking on it. Like, come bet with us. Why are we better than others? We're seeing traction, but we're not seeing life-saving traction in a sense. So as I see more of this come in and having someone, CEO of MGM, come out and say what a struggle this is going to be and how competitive this is going to get, because you've got someone across the road just torching billions of dollars potentially on marketing to build up what they're trying to build up and then exit or do whatever they do. How the fuck are we meant to do it? So that's the challenge for us right now of how do we do that? And I'm happy for anyone out there that has ideas or has ways of potentially marketing this and getting that brand out there, but we're up against it. And the goal is just to try and get this customer service, same thing that Joe and that did in the beginning of every customer is value, communicate with them, offer them, why this is a place to bet. And we're not looking to be number 1 or number 2 on your phone. We're looking to be number 4 or 5 as enough people have enough apps. And we don't mind the person that's going to lose 3% ROI. We'll go to war with them and we'll have a drink with them afterwards because that's who we are and that's what we're trying to do.
And Joe, building on that, analysts project FanDuel will spend up to $300 million this year on its prediction market platform, with DraftKings spending about $400 million in its own right. Considering the competition to acquire a lot of these same users, how effective do you think FanKings will be against Kalshi and Polymarket? And how might their experience with DFS and sports betting give them a leg up?
Well, theoretically, it should give them a leg up because they already got the customers. It's the reason why they're the number 1 and number 2 sports books in America. It isn't because they had this rich depth of sports betting, product history or anything like that. It's because they had databases full of customers who had already deposited with them from the DFS days. So the same should be true now. So you'd think like, okay, hey, advantage FanKings. Also, you'd have to look right now at the ability of Kalshi primarily because of Polymarket's still weirdly not fully on shore here yet, but so primarily Kalshi and their incredibly hand-handed way that they keep marketing themselves. They seem like they take 1 step forward, step on their dicks, take 2 steps back. They also have to be careful in how they market themselves because, as you just see now with this most recent class action lawsuit, the more they make it sound like, not that it sounds like it's betting, but actually say it's betting or gambling or something like that. And the nomenclature that they use, it's not just in the court of public opinion, it's in the courts literally. And, that's a problem for us. But here's the thing. They are blanketing the media right now. They are just sucking the oxygen out of, the medium, all mainstream media, whether it's print, digital, whatever. They just have mind share. And in America, at least, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but that when you are the challenger and you have the hot new brand and everything like that, there's a momentum to that is just powerful. And it makes fan kings who've been around for all of 10, 15 years seem old, doesn't it? It's like being Facebook with Instagram, but you're getting your lunch handed to you by TikTok, who really isn't that much different from your product, but they're new and they found their niche and they've found this momentum for their brand. And then suddenly everybody's talking about AI on TikTok, similar to what's going on right now with the prediction markets. So it will be interesting to see just how things escalate at a time, like we were just talking in the previous segment about self-preservation and how to better plan for the future so that you don't come crash into a wall someday, which is public and government resistance to these products, regardless of what you call them. That's not going to happen this year. This year, if anything, we're going to, push the gas on this thing. And I don't know how it could get bigger from a media and marketing and advertising sense, but we're going to find out.
And guys, let's hit the home stretch this week with a look ahead to the NFL draft. Adam, last week you teased draft props coming soon across the Planetech portfolio. Give us an overview of the markets you're offering and the biggest action you're seeing so far.
So I pulled out a few. We've got ones like total Big Ten players selected first round, bunch of listed players. But these were the three that I noticed the most money and potentially the biggest moves. Total ACC players taken in the first round opened up under 6.5 plus 228, got all the way to minus 600. They then changed the number to 5.5, which went to minus 125 under and moved all the way to 400. So feels like there's not a lot of confidence in ACC players getting drafted in the first round. One actually shows up as a little bit of a data play right now is Caleb Downs, over under 9.5 positions. 64% of the overall money is on the over, 75% of the master money there is on the under. And the other one that highlighted out, and I've got zero chance of pronouncing this name correctly, but I'll give it a whirl. Olaviva Lone, draft position 14.5, opened under 14.5 plus 38, ended up at minus 200 until it was taken off the board. Heavy, like 90+% of the money on that under there. So again, not a lot of confidence in Olaviva Loani going through there early in the first round.
As a Chargers fan, hoping he slides to 22 somehow, unlikely, but I'll give it my best shot and say Vega Ioana is the shorter version of the pronunciation that I think I've been hearing. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. But Adam, I wanted to follow up because I'm sensing that for years, a lot of the bettors I know have cleaned up on the draft to the point that even the most reputable books have seemed to back off over the past couple of cycles with fewer markets and lower limits. And I'm starting to get the feeling that ironically, at the same time the odds board has shrunk, a lot of these bettors seem to be having a harder time uncovering edges, with some I know who used to crush the draft, now maybe not even as confident about profiting at all. I'm wondering if you're seeing the same thing. And if so, what kind of opportunity that could present to somebody like you with your risk management approach across Prime Sports and BetCris?
Yeah, so one, I was surprised at how few props we had up at the moment. Maybe I'm missing a section where they're hidden somewhere else, but I was very surprised at that. However, they are up there for $1,000. So it's not like they're shying away from this at the moment. Now, were they up a week ago for 100 and 250 and stuff like that? Possibly, but I guess they've gotten enough action right now where they're confident in putting them up for 4,000, which I don't know, who else has them up and who else is offering them out there. But yeah, I've heard that even last year, I heard from a few people that they didn't have as successful time as they had in previous years. But I think there's a lot of it is late. Rec money doesn't really come in till possibly the coverage starts. And then, people start flowing in and you'll find last minute, you may find, some value of over movement in some areas. But yeah, that's part of the times. As you as we've said in the past, you could probably go in there and now scrape 1,000 media sites of people that have ideas, or team media personnel, etc., that are giving this information and now sharing, and it's a lot more available. And now, I mean, I did it on the Kentucky Derby, where it took me literally an hour to do what normally takes me 5 days, by accumulating all the sources, running it through with some questions through Claude or ChatGPT or any of those ones, finding snippets out of that, diving a little further into that, and knowing what races to watch, what, situations within those races, where I've actually found a runner that literally ran dead heat head to head with another one. One is 8-1, one is 40-1. So, little spidey senses going off. There's something wrong here. This can't be right. So then I dig into that further. And I'm sure the draft, with so many players, so many different props and all those kind of things, it's the same way. Researching has become a lot easier, so you can get into this a lot quicker. And I'm sure any trader worth their salt is doing the same thing, and they're leaning it and nudging the price in certain ways as well. So yeah, it's always been a cat and mouse game. Now it's just a cat and mouse, I guess, mighty mouse. And I don't know who's a really fast cat, but that's the game that it is these days.
And Joe, from potential AI applications to more analog applications, or from betting interests to fan interests, what are you watching for most closely as the draft approaches?
So, Matt, or what are you saying is like, okay, now we're going to dumb down our thoughts about the upcoming NFL draft because we're going to Joe. Joe has not declared his 30 years of betting degeneracy and women addiction here. So we're going to get the same thing that you would get on any sports talk yelling show.
Got to get something from the mayor of Toutville back in office.
Yeah. Okay. Here's my pick. Fernando Mendoza is going to be the first pick in the draft. That's one reason why. I mean, I think when it's pretty clear who's going to be the first pick, it's less interesting. Mendoza's probably not even the best offensive player in the draft. That would be a great debate about who that would particularly be. Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame. But one, I find this tedious. The amount of time and attention. We're doing the NFL's work for them, aren't we now? And we're the ones paying for it, right? The NFL has done an excellent job of turning their off season into yet another season, right? Free agency, the draft, free agency again, and trading. And like the number of people who were messaging me yesterday about like, bye AJ Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles heading to the New England Patriots. Americans in particular have managed to turn this into like the silliest of seasons. I mean, why don't we cover like who Google, Facebook, Oracle, Apple, and everything are going to be hiring out of college this year? And who knows, maybe that's the next line of business over there in Kalshi and Poly Market. This is tedious. We are paying to help the NFL increase the purchase of their draft by offering these markets. We don't do well at them. And now it sounds like, the players' opportunities are coming down as well because the markets are tightening and because this might be the chalkiest of drafts, right? So anyway, to me, the faster we can get past this distraction and into actual real ball, the better, And the one thing I'll say is I think the bet here, and I don't think anybody can make this bet like as a post-up bet. This would have to be a credit bet. But it would be like, what will Fernando Mendoza's performance be under his rookie contract? Because the quarterback, after, interestingly enough, NHL goaltender, is the single hardest position in professional sports globally to project future success based on past success. So congratulations to Fernando Mendoza and what he did at Indiana and everything like that. He was basically a nobody before Indiana. We'll see what happens after he goes to the Raiders and has to deal with the sword of Damocles, which is Tom Brady, minority owner, hanging over him for the next few years. But if you're a betting person, I would be shorting Fernando Mendoza to turn into any kind of a quality NFL quarterback, just simply because history and the numbers seem to be dead set against him. Is he the next Tom Brady or is he the next Johnny Football? I don't know. But the sooner we get past this and the sooner we get past all of the expertise that all the guys sitting at the bar have about all the depth of all these picks and who should go where and everything like that, the better. Let's just get the football.
All right, and with Joe's sights set on Fernando Mendoza going #1 overall, we can safely assume he will remain in office as the mayor of Toutville for at least another week.
I'm not proud of that one. Not proud of that one. That is the chalkiest in chalk, baby.
To the audience, however you may or may not be betting on it, and whoever you hope to see your team take when they're on the clock, enjoy the NFL draft. Thanks as always for tuning in, and when all the picks are in, we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.